Richard Eskow, the host of the Zero Hour, drops by the program to tell us what the latest schemes are that the Republicans have for your and my Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or our parents, or whoever it may be. It's pretty grim stuff. Check this out. Leave your comments and don't forget to subscribe. Donald Trump is proposing to cut Social Security in his budget. He is proposing, he's the guy who said every Republican on this stage is going to tell you that they're going to protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I'm the only one who actually will do it. They all want to cut it. Well, he wants to cut all three, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. On the line with us is Richard R.J. Eskow, Senior Fellow at the Campaign for America's Future, host of the Zero Hour on React Radio and now on Free Speech TV, ourfuture.org, and this is the zerohour.com, or the website, so you can tweet him at R.J. Eskow. Richard, welcome back to the program.
Great to be back, Tom.
So give us the details on exactly what's going on with regard to Social Security. I know that there's activity in the House of Representatives. There is, of course, Donald Trump's budget. I don't know if any Republicans have gone on record saying that they support his plan to cut Social Security. I'd be surprised if they hadn't. So where are we at? What's actually going on? What are the details?
Well, to me, Tom, it's one of the most interesting times for Social Security in many years in a way, because we're back to a very stark difference between the two parties in a way we haven't seen in a generation, in my opinion. We have Trump now joining with Republican orthodoxy, basically, by proposing major cuts to Social Security as well as to Medicaid and Medicare. And both Medicaid and Medicare contribute to the retirement security or disability security of people who receive Social Security, because Medicaid pays roughly 65% of all nursing home costs, for example. So it's very important in the lives of seniors, and Medicare, of course, being critically important to seniors. So we have the typical, in addition to the budget cuts to Social Security itself, we have Trump falling in line with the standard GOP assault on retirement security and the security of disabled people in this country. But on the flip side, we have something we haven't seen in a generation, which is legitimate hearings in the House, in this case, the Social Security Subcommittee, on expanding Social Security. We have a couple proposals to do that. The recent hearings were on Representative John Larson's proposal to expand Social Security benefits. Now, it's not the most left of the proposals out there, but it's got enormous support, and it does increase benefits. It's got more than 200 co-sponsors, meaning it's well on the way to passage before it even gets put up for a vote. And the hearings today, to me, it was, as much as anything else, the crossing of a symbolic barrier, because as far as I know, it hasn't been since Social Security was expanded in several ways in the 1950s that we've had the House of Representatives actually holding serious hearings about expanding Social Security. And as you know, that was very much part of the political zeitgeist at the time. You had President Eisenhower, a Republican, boasting in 1956 in the Republican Party platform that Social Security benefits were extended or increased to 10 million people during his first term. So you had a consensus in support of expanding the program then, and I believe what we're going to see is a majority consensus again in favor of expanding Social Security.
Yeah. Meanwhile, with regard to Medicare, and Medicare for all, this whole idea of expanding Medicare into a national health care system like Canada did back in the 1960s. Pramila Jayapal and Bernie Sanders have a very specific bill, hers in the House, his in the Senate. I believe that they're harmonized, correct me if I'm wrong, that would do just that. And now we're starting to see some pushback from this. I noticed one of the Democratic presidential candidates this morning, who announced this morning, Beto O'Rourke, was specifically asked about that in a town hall meeting, and he basically just said he embraces the idea of everybody having access to high-quality health care, which, of course, is what Ronald Reagan ran for re-election on in '84, and then I think the next year he signed that bill that required, that made it illegal for emergency rooms to turn people away if they couldn't pay. And then the Republicans ever since have said, well, everybody has access to health care in America. What's going on here with this, Richard?
Thom, I listened with great interest to your first hour, your discussion about Beto and about Nancy Pelosi saying that, values come first, which I think is true. But I think in the case of Medicare for All, it's support for it has almost become an assertion of values as well as support of a specific policy, because words like access are words that some of us have come to view with a certain concern and healthy skepticism, I think, because access to something you can't afford, for example, isn't really access at all. So I think, we can debate the specifics of the Medicare for All bill put together by Representative Jayapal. I happen to think it's extremely good and extremely strong, but the underlying values behind it are that cost should not be a factor in getting the medical care you need, that if people need care, I've lived through a generation of health policy where it was felt that you created copays and deductibles partially so that employers could pay less to cover their employees, but partially because it was believed it was a kind of social engineering, as if people would just frivolously get care they don't need if those things weren't in place. I don't think people believe that anymore. And I think people are now saying it's a shame when, as was the case with a young teacher recently, someone dies because they don't feel they can afford $160 copayment to buy the prescription medications they need to control a serious flu. Yeah. So I think that's where we're at now, where Medicare. Go ahead.
Well, I was just to wrap this up. Is it? Did I read this right? Is it actually true? Is this actually going on that the Trump administration and the Republicans are proposing that they begin taking the names and identities of people who are on disability or on, any kind of, basically any kind of disability, Social Security disability, and look at their Facebook pages to see if they can find evidence that they're not really disabled? I mean, everybody, no matter how much pain they're in, can pull off 3 seconds of a smile for a picture for Facebook. And everybody knows that the way that people portray themselves on Facebook, is not really their real life and doesn't show their real challenges and difficulties and all these things. We all kind of put our best face forward, our best foot forward. Is this, I mean, are we looking at a situation here where large chunks of people who are on disability might suddenly find themselves having to go to court to defend their disability claims because they posted some pictures on Facebook 5 years ago?
Potentially, and at the same time that the Trump administration wants to cut the administrative budget so that there's nobody there to hear their case. They could have their benefits cut off. And it's another way, it's a very draconian 1984 way of demonizing the people who, these benefits are supposed to be here when we need them. And yet this is another way for Republicans, including Trump, to demonize people who do need them and make them seem like the other. And isn't it funny that the Republicans who always complain about intrusive government want to impose such a kind of police state activity on our private lives?